Loxley Zane stared at the monitor with the kind of dread usually reserved for tax audits and deep space colonoscopies. The screen displayed a riot of colors, none of which should be there in the first place. He scratched his head, a futile attempt to dislodge either clarity or the 3-day-old sweat caked under his helmet. "Looks like Jupiter's finally decided to throw a disco," he muttered. The observation deck of Jupiter Station Zephyr was as glamorous as a broom closet. But it was home. "Lox, you seeing this?" came a voice crackling over the intercom. It was Talia, the station's resident expert in making Loxley question his life choices. "I see it, I just don't believe it," he replied, leaning back in his chair, which complained louder than his ex-wife. Talia's image flickered onto the adjacent screen, her eyebrows doing the kind of acrobatics that belonged in a circus. "Tell me it's a glitch," she said. "I'd love to," Loxley sighed, "but that would involve lying, and I try to keep that skill honed for poker night." The atmospheric anomaly was spinning faster than a politician caught embezzling, and it wasn't even close to what anyone would call normal around here. "So, what's the plan, fearless leader?" Talia asked. "We ignore it until it goes away," Loxley shrugged, "or we investigate and risk turning into human popcorn. Tough call." "You're a real inspiration," she snorted. "I know I should write self-help books." Loxley pushed himself up, waving towards the door. "Come on, let's go pretend we know what we're doing." They made their way through the station, the sterile corridors a reminder that aesthetics had taken a backseat to function when Zephyr was built. The walls were as dull as a Monday morning, and the lighting flickered like it was trying to set the ambience for a horror movie. "Think it's another one of those unexplainable phenomenons like the last time?" Talia asked as they approached the lab. "You mean the time we found out it was just radiation from a forgotten satellite warming up?" Loxley remembered. "Could be. Or maybe Jupiter's just in the mood for a little chaos. Can't blame it. If I was stuck with a 100-year storm, I'd go a bit nuts too." Inside the lab, Henrik was already poking at buttons like a toddler with a new toy. "Hey Henrik," Loxley greeted. "How's the family?" "Still imaginary," Henrik replied without looking up. "I named my plants after them though, so there's that." "Plants are harder to disappoint," Loxley nodded sagely. "So what's this mess we got here?" Henrik grinned, the kind of grin that usually preceded a "you're not gonna like this" explanation. "It's an anomaly, all right, but there's something." He trailed off, eyes glued to his screen. "Fascinating," he finished, which in his language meant we're screwed. "Fascinating how?" Talia cut in, arms crossed like she was shielding herself from the coming nonsense. "Take a look," Henrik pointed. The data was an incomprehensible jumble to most, but Loxley had a knack for making sense out of chaos. "Well, I'll be damned," he said. "It's like a weather pattern but on crack, and it looks like it wants to pay us a visit." "You think it could be?" Talia began, but Henrik cut her off. "Artificial," he concluded. "Somebody's playing God and they're doing it in our backyard." "Great," Loxley said. "That's just what we need. Another set of intergalactic tourists thinking Jupiter's the hot new vacation spot." "Speaking of tourists," Talia said, "we've got another problem. The Quarlocks are coming." "Oh, fantastic." Loxley rolled his eyes. "Nothing like hosting a bunch of alien explorers to add to the excitement. What do they want this time?" "Same as always," she replied, "to study us up close or whatever nonsense they spewed last time." "You'd think they would have learned by now," Henrik snorted. "Humans don't take well to being dissected." "I prefer to think of it as a mutual exchange of culture," Loxley quipped. "They tell us how advanced they are, we show them how low our standards can go." "Why do they always pick us anyway?" Talia wondered aloud. "Maybe we're just irresistibly charming," Loxley offered. "Or maybe they're just into the whole primitive species vibe we give off." "Either way," Henrik said, "we need to handle this before they arrive. No point in adding alien gawkers to an already messy situation." "Agreed," Loxley nodded. "Let's see if we can patch this up before the Quarlocks show up with their notepads and microscopes." They set to work, each taking a station as they tried to make sense of the chaos unfolding around them. The lab was filled with the sounds of frantic typing, occasional curses, and the hum of machinery that always seemed on the verge of giving up the ghost. "I swear, one day this station's going to revolt," Loxley said as he banged on a panel that had decided to stop cooperating. "Can't really blame it," Talia replied. "I've seen how you treat the coffee machine." "Hey, the coffee machine and I have an understanding," Loxley defended. "I don't kick it and it gives me sludge that vaguely resembles caffeine." Hours passed, each one feeling like it dragged on longer than a disappointing sequel. Eventually, Loxley looked up from his work, rubbing his eyes. "Any progress?" "We've got theories," Henrik said, "but no solid answers. Whatever this is, it's not playing by the rules." "Figures," Loxley groaned. "All right, let's call it a night. We'll tackle this again tomorrow, hopefully with fewer migraines." As they left the lab, Loxley couldn't shake the feeling that they'd just scratched the surface of something much bigger. The anomaly wasn't just a scientific curiosity, it was a harbinger of chaos. And the Quarlox's impending arrival added another layer of complication to an already tangled mess. "You ever feel like we're just pawns in some cosmic game?" Talia asked as they walked back to their quarters. "All the time," Loxley replied, "but I like to think of it as being the stars of our own tragic comedy." "I don't know about you," she said, laughing, "but I'm ready for the intermission." "Keep dreaming," Loxley chuckled. "We're just getting to the good part." As they parted ways for the night, Loxley paused, glancing out a viewport at the swirling chaos of Jupiter below. It was beautiful in a dangerous, unpredictable way. Kind of like life, he mused. Just as he turned to head to his quarters, the station's lights flickered ominously, and a voice crackled over the intercom. "Attention, crew of Jupiter Station Zephyr." The automated announcement began in its usual deadpan. "Prepare for arrival of Quarlox delegation. Estimated time of arrival, 2 hours." Loxley sighed deeply. "Great," he muttered to himself, "just what we need. More aliens to complicate a perfectly good cluster of **K. He turned away from the viewport, already feeling the weight of impending chaos settling on his shoulders. In space, no one could hear you scream, but they could definitely hear you complain. As the station's corridors swallowed him up once more, Loxley found solace in the small comforts. His creaky chair, Henrik's terrible jokes, and Talia's exasperated eye rolls. For better or worse, they were all in this together. And if they managed to survive the next few days, maybe they'd even have a good story to tell. Loxley Zane tried to muster some enthusiasm as he trudged through the sterile hallways of Jupiter Station Zephyr, but the prospect of entertaining the Quarlox was as appealing as cleaning the station's air filters with his toothbrush. The lights overhead buzzed like a swarm of mechanical bees, casting flickering shadows on the dull walls. They were the kind of shadows that whispered, "Give up now. Go back to bed." 2 hours until the circus arrives, Talia remarked, falling into step beside him. Her voice had the kind of dryness usually associated with the Sahara. "Think they'll bring their own popcorn?" "If we're lucky, maybe they'll bring something stronger," Loxley replied, rubbing his temples. Who'd have thought being treated like a zoo exhibit would be part of the job description? "Hey, some people pay good money to be ogled by aliens," Talia joked. "We're getting the experience for free." "Yeah, can't beat free humiliation," Loxley muttered. "At least we're not getting prodded with sticks. Yet." They reached the observation deck just in time to see the Quarlox ship glide into view, sleek and shiny like a corporate executive's dream yacht. The station's docking bay groaned as it accommodated the alien vessel, which gleamed like a freshly polished trophy. Except this trophy came with the added bonus of intergalactic condescension. "Here we go," Loxley sighed, as the docking bay doors hissed open, revealing a group of Quarlox dignitaries. They had the look of something that crawled out of a biology textbook and decided evolution was too much work. Their skin shimmered like oil on water, and they had more eyes than Loxley had fingers. "Greetings, esteemed humans," the lead Quarlox announced, with the kind of enthusiasm that suggested they'd been practicing in front of a mirror. "We are here to observe your fascinating society and behavior." Loxley exchanged a glance with Talia. "And by observe, they mean patronize," he whispered. "Please, allow us to show you around," Talia said, gesturing with the air of someone trying to coax a cat out of a tree. "Our station may not be much, but we like to think of it as quaint." The Quarlox delegation followed them through the corridors, chattering among themselves in a language that sounded like an enthusiastic blender. Occasionally, One would stop and study a panel or a piece of equipment, nodding sagely as though they'd just discovered the meaning of life. "So," Loxley said, trying to sound conversational, "what exactly are you hoping to learn from us?" The lead Quarlox tilted its head, a gesture that was equal parts curious and condescending. "We wish to understand the primitive yet charming intricacies of human life. Your simplicity is most intriguing." "Charming, huh?" Loxley replied. "That's one way to put it. I prefer to think of us as endearingly dysfunctional." The tour continued, with the Quarlox taking copious notes on their data pads, which looked suspiciously like children's toys painted silver. They oohed and ahed over the most mundane things, like the station's water filtration system and Loxley's collection of novelty mugs. "Fascinating," one of the Quarlox said, holding up a mug that proclaimed, "World's okayest pilot." "Is this an example of human self-reflection?" "Yeah," Loxley replied, deadpan. "We're real deep thinkers." As they moved through the station, the Quarlox insisted on conducting tests to better understand human physiology and psychology. The first test was a series of coordination exercises that bore an uncanny resemblance to a children's obstacle course. "Really?" Talia whispered as she watched Loxley try to balance on one foot while juggling 3 balls. "You'd think they'd have better methods by now." "I can barely do this sober," Loxley grumbled, dropping a ball. "I'm starting to think their entire species is just screwing with us." The Quarlox, in their earnest enthusiasm, recorded every misstep with what could only be described as glee. "Your species is quite entertaining in its awkward grace," the lead Quarlox commented, clapping its tentacle-like appendages together. "Awkward grace," Loxley muttered to himself. "I should put that on my resume." The second test involved a series of logic puzzles that the Quarlox insisted were crucial in evaluating cognitive function. Loxley stared at the puzzles, realizing they looked suspiciously like the kind of brain teasers you'd find in a doctor's waiting room. "Are these things for real?" he asked Talia, pointing at a puzzle depicting a fox, a chicken, and a bag of grain that needed to cross a river. "Apparently," she replied, stifling a laugh. "They're treating us like pet projects." "Guess that makes us their favorite science experiment," Loxley said, rolling his eyes. He fumbled through the puzzle, thankful for the few times he'd actually paid attention in childhood. The Quarlox observed with the intensity of a child watching a magician. "Your problem-solving skills are primitive but show potential," one commented, as though Loxley were a particularly bright Labrador. "Gee, thanks," Loxley replied. "I can also sit and roll over if you're interested." The final test was, to Loxley's horror, a dance-off. The Quarlox claimed that understanding human rhythm was vital for their research. The station's AI piped in an upbeat tune that was about as harmonious as a catfight. "This has got to be some kind of cosmic joke," Talia said, trying not to laugh as Loxley attempted to mimic the Quarlox's erratic movements. Even Henrik joined in, his stiff limbs moving like a malfunctioning robot. "Hey, no one said you had to be good at it," Loxley said between gritted teeth. "They just want to see us flail around like idiots." "Mission accomplished then," Talia quipped, barely containing her mirth. The Quarlox watched, their multiple eyes blinking in rhythm with the music. "Your dances are a delightful expression of your species' chaotic nature," the lead Quarlox said. "Good to know we can add chaotic dancing to our list of achievements," Loxley replied, finally stopping with a sigh of relief as the music mercifully ended. As the Quarlox wrapped up their study, they presented Loxley and his team with a token of appreciation, a small, intricate device that looked like a cross between a snow globe and a potato peeler. "To commemorate our time with you," the lead Quarlox explained. "May you continue to fascinate the galaxy with your uniqueness." Loxley accepted the gift with a forced smile. "Thanks," he said, turning it over in his hands. "I'll cherish it always." As the Quarlox delegation prepared to leave, Loxley found himself surprisingly relieved. The aliens might have seen them as primitive, but they'd also treated them with a kind of bewildered respect. Like watching a dog walk on its hind legs, impressive but not something you'd expect to see every day. "Well, that was something," Talia said as they watched the Quarlox ship depart. "Think they'll come back?" Probably, Loxley replied, leaning against the wall. We're like their favorite sitcom. Can't get enough of our wacky antics. At least they didn't try to dissect us, Henrik added, still trying to get his breathing back to normal after the dance-off debacle. I call that a win. Yeah, Loxley agreed. Could have been worse. Could have been better, Talia shot back with a smirk. Story of our lives, Loxley replied, watching the Quarlock ship shrink into a distant speck. For a moment, he imagined the aliens trying to explain Earth to their peers. Yes, they are primitive, but they are so amusing. And couldn't help but chuckle. As the station settled back into its usual rhythm, Loxley couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. Something larger loomed on the horizon, something that promised to be as unpredictable and chaotic as a human dance-off. And in the quiet aftermath of the Quarlocks' departure, he found comfort in the knowledge that whatever came next, they'd face it together. Misfit crew of Jupiter Station Zephyr, ready to greet the universe with open arms and a healthy dose of sarcasm. Hey, Loxley said, turning to his team with a grin. What do you say we take a break, raid the snack stash, and pretend today never happened? Sounds like a plan, Talia agreed, already heading for the galley. I could use a stiff drink and a good laugh. Count me in, Henrik said, trailing behind. As they settled into their makeshift sanctuary, surrounded by mismatched chairs and a hodgepodge of snacks, Loxley felt a sense of camaraderie that transcended their situation. Here, in the heart of a tin can floating through space, they had each other, and that was more than enough. To surviving another day, Talia toasted, raising her glass. Cheers, Loxley replied, clinking hers with his, and to whatever madness tomorrow brings. Bring it on, Henrik added, settling back with a satisfied sigh. In the vast expanse of space, as the stars twinkled like distant promises, Jupiter Station Zephyr hummed with life. Imperfect, irreverent, and beautifully human. Loxley Zane leaned against the wall of the observation deck. Jupiter spun lazily in the distance, a massive gas giant that looked like it couldn't care less about the antics of the galaxy. Just like Loxley, he closed his eyes and sighed, feeling the weight of the Quarlocks' visit like a hangover that refused to go away. They're coming back tomorrow, Talia said, materializing beside him with the stealth of a cat burglar. She was holding a data pad which Loxley figured contained all the latest grand plans from their alien visitors. Apparently, they weren't satisfied with yesterday's show. Figures, Loxley grumbled. We're the universe's favorite reality TV show. Can't just have one season. I heard they want to test our emotional responses, Talia added, scrolling through the notes. Or, as they put it, assess the complexities of human sentimentality. Great, Loxley said. Let's show them how well-adjusted we are by crying over spilled milk or something. Talia chuckled, but her voice was tinged with the kind of weariness only prolonged exposure to aliens who thought you were an amusing monkey could produce. What's the plan, genius? We can't keep being their lab rats. Loxley scratched his chin, an action that made him look thoughtful and not at all like he was stalling for time. I'm thinking. Strategic sabotage. We give them a little taste of human ingenuity. Sabotage, huh? Aren't you worried they'll catch on? Talia asked, eyebrow raised. Not if we do it right, Loxley replied with a grin that suggested he had more tricks up his sleeve than a magician on payday. Besides, what's the worst that could happen? They make us do the chicken dance again. Good point, Talia said. I suppose there's only so much dignity one can lose. Their plans for alien foiling began with a trip to the station's engine room, a place Loxley liked to call the heart of the beast. Not because it was anything mechanical, but because it was the one place the aliens hadn't bothered to visit yet. Too much grease and not enough glamour. All right, Loxley said, slapping his hands together as if preparing for a particularly tricky surgery. Let's see if we can't introduce a few convenient malfunctions. Talia watched as he tinkered with a few dials and wires, twisting and turning them with the kind of casual confidence one would expect from someone who's faked their way through a few too many maintenance reports. What exactly are you doing? She asked, peeking over his shoulder. Laying the groundwork for some good old-fashioned chaos, Loxley replied. A little rerouting here, a bit of cross-wiring there. Should keep them on their toes. Or blow us up, Talia pointed out. Details, Loxley said with a dismissive wave. Besides, if we go down, at least we'll take them with us. Heroic sacrifice and all that. You're an inspiration, Talia deadpanned. Loxley stood back, admiring his handiwork. There we go. That should do it. Now, all we need is for the Corlocks to trip the new system and watch the fireworks. The next day, as promised, the Corlocks returned, armed with their data pads and that same infuriating curiosity that made Loxley want to scream. The lead Corlocks, who they'd nicknamed Squidward because it was hard to take something seriously when it looked like a rainbow-colored cephalopod, approached with an eager twitch to its tentacles. "Are you prepared for today's studies, esteemed humans?" Squidward asked, its voice dripping with anticipation. "Born ready," Loxley replied, his voice smoother than a con artist's handshake. "What's first on the agenda? We wish to explore your emotional spectrum," Squidward announced, "and your reaction to unexpected stimuli." Loxley had to bite his tongue to stop himself from laughing out loud. Unexpected stimuli indeed. Sounds like a blast. As the Corlocks led them through a series of tests, each more ridiculous than the last, Loxley focused on keeping his expression neutral. He could feel the anticipation bubbling beneath his skin, a mischievous glee at the thought of watching their plan unfold. Finally, one of the Corlocks approached a control panel that Loxley had subtly altered the day before. With a flourish of tentacles, the alien pressed a button, and the station's lights flickered like a strobe at a bad rave. "What's happening?" Squidward demanded, swiveling its eyes toward Loxley. "Just a little technical glitch," Loxley replied, feigning innocence. "I told you this place is quaint, but it's also held together with duct tape and prayers." The Corlocks clicked their tongue-like appendages in what Loxley could only assume was mild panic. As the lights continued their dance, he shared a glance with Talia, who was doing an admirable job of looking surprised rather than delighted. "Perhaps we should pause the tests," one of the Corlocks suggested, its voice carrying an edge of uncertainty. "Nonsense," Loxley said, waving a hand dismissively. "These things happen all the time. Part of the charm, really." As if on cue, the sound of sirens wailed through the corridors, an echoing klaxon that added an extra touch of chaos to the scene. The Corlocks' eyes darted around with the urgency of tourists caught in a sudden rainstorm. "In calm," Loxley said, gesturing for them to follow. "We'll sort this out." He led them through the station with the confidence of a tour guide who's lost none of their guests yet, even as the Corlocks muttered and clicked to each other in distress. "Is this normal for humans?" Squidward asked, its voice pitched with nervous curiosity. "Absolutely," Talia interjected, slipping seamlessly into the charade. "We thrive on unpredictability, keeps things interesting." Finally, after looping them around the station in a grand display of misdirection, Loxley brought them back to the observation deck. The sirens had ceased, the lights returning to a steady glow. He turned to Squidward with a triumphant grin. "See, all sorted," Loxley said. "Just a minor hiccup." The Corlocks murmured among themselves, their eyes darting with a mix of suspicion and confusion. "Your resilience is commendable," Squidward said at last, though the words were laced with skepticism. "Thanks," Loxley replied, clapping a hand on the alien's shoulder in a friendly manner that made it flinch. "We aim to please." As the Corlocks gathered their notes and prepared to leave, Loxley couldn't help but feel a swell of satisfaction. A small victory, perhaps, but a victory nonetheless. "Think they'll catch on?" Talia asked once the aliens were out of earshot. "Maybe," Loxley admitted, "but by then we'll have something else up our sleeves." "Like what?" Talia asked, curious. "Not sure yet," Loxley said with a shrug, "but it's like they say, where there's a will there's a way, and where there's a Loxley there's mischief." Talia shook her head, a smile tugging at her lips. "You know this isn't going to stop them, right? They'll just escalate their tests." "Let them try," Loxley replied with a challenge in his voice. "We've got plenty more where that came from." The next day, true to Talia's prediction, the Corlocks returned with more gadgets and a fervor that suggested they were doubling down. This time, they seemed determined to get to the bottom of what made humans tick, or malfunction, as the case might be. "They're like kids in a candy store," Talia observed as they watched the aliens set up their next round of tests. "Except instead of candy, it's our dignity." "Too bad for them," Loxley said. "I'm fresh out of dignity." The Corlox's new tests were, unsurprisingly, more invasive. They brought devices that looked somewhere between medieval torture devices and modern art sculptures. Loxley couldn't decide whether to be worried or impressed. "This test," Squidward announced, waving a device that looked like a spaghetti strainer on steroids, "will help us understand the elasticity of human endurance." "And if it doesn't?" Loxley asked, eyeing the contraption with suspicion. "Then we will continue to study until we do," Squidward replied, as if that were the simplest solution in the universe. "Fantastic," Loxley said with a sigh. What could possibly go wrong? As the Corlox busied themselves with their shiny instruments, Loxley and Talia exchanged a glance. They prepared for this, rigging a few choice systems around the station to respond. Unpredictably. Sure enough, as one of the Corlox activated their device, a soft rumble echoed through the station. It was subtle at first, like the purr of a cat that had eaten something it shouldn't, but it quickly escalated to a full-blown groan. "What is that?" Squidward squawked, its eyes darting around in alarm. "Just the station settling," Loxley lied smoothly. "Happens all the time, like I said, real cozy place." The Corlox weren't convinced, not that Loxley cared. He was too busy trying not to laugh as the station continued its symphony of discontent, the hull vibrating with a sound that could only be described as space flatulence. "Your station is unique," one of the Corlox said, struggling for words that wouldn't be considered an intergalactic insult. "Thanks," Loxley replied. "We like to think of it as rustic." "Or barely functional," Talia added, not missing a beat. As the Corlox attempted to salvage their tests, Loxley and Talia stood back, pleased with how their sabotage had played out. They'd shown the aliens that humans were unpredictable, chaotic, and, most importantly, not to be underestimated. "Think they'll ever get tired of this?" Talia asked, watching as the Corlox packed up their equipment, their eyes still darting with suspicion. "Hopefully," Loxley said. "But until they do, we'll keep giving them a run for their money." As the Corlox finally departed, leaving the crew of Jupiter Station Zephyr in peace, Loxley couldn't help but feel a sense of accomplishment. They'd stood their ground, shown the aliens that humans weren't just simple creatures to be prodded and poked. And more than that, they'd done it with style, chaotic, unpredictable, and utterly human style. Sure, the Corlox would be back, but Loxley was confident they'd be ready. "To tomorrow's madness," Loxley said, raising an imaginary glass. Talia grinned. "Bring it on." Jupiter Station Zephyr was quiet after the Corlox left, a silence only occasionally broken by the groan of the station's aging infrastructure. Loxley Zane leaned against the wall, staring out at Jupiter's swirling storms, feeling a bit like one of those ancient mariners staring out into the void, minus the romanticism, and plus a hangover from recycled air. He was about to enjoy this moment of relative peace when Talia appeared, data pad in hand, stealthy as ever. "Good news or bad?" Loxley asked, not bothering to turn around. He could feel her judgmental gaze piercing the back of his skull like twin laser beams. "Depends on how you feel about being domesticated," Talia replied sarcastically, tossing the data pad onto the console next to him. Loxley picked it up, scrolling through the contents. "Oh, this should be good," he muttered, eyes scanning the screen. "The Corlox want to what? Enhance our productivity," he snorted. "I didn't realize we were running a galactic sweatshop." Talia leaned on the console next to him, her expression as serious as it ever got. "They're planning to install these gadgets, some kind of neural interface meant to streamline human efficiency." "Streamline? More like neuter," Loxley quipped, who knew the Corlox were efficiency experts. He pictured Squidward with a clipboard, ticking off boxes labeled subdue and dominate. "They're pushing it," Talia said, crossing her arms. "Won't be long before they're asking us to bark on command." "Or fetch their slippers," Loxley added darkly. "We need to stop this." Talia nodded. "I've been thinking about that. We can't keep them guessing with minor malfunctions forever. They'll catch on and then we're all just lab rats in their maze." "More like rats in a burning maze," Loxley corrected. "And I'm allergic to mazes." He pushed off the wall, pacing as his mind raced. They needed a plan, something clever enough to throw the Corlox off their game. Something that would make those multi-eyed creeps rethink their whole study the humans' SH stick. Maybe it's time for a little upgrade of our own, Loxley mused aloud. Talia raised an eyebrow. You mean sabotage? Loxley grinned. I prefer the term strategic resistance. Strategic resistance, Talia repeated, rolling her eyes. You should have been a lawyer. Mom always said I had a knack for semantics. Loxley stopped pacing, his grin fading into something more serious. We can't let them turn us into their version of compliant little worker bees. If they succeed, we're done. No more surprise glitches, no more independence. Talia sighed, rubbing her temples. All right, what's the play, maestro? Loxley stared out at Jupiter again, the great red spot glaring back like a judge unimpressed by his defense. We need to make them think their gadgets are working, while we find a way to fry the damn things. Fry them? Talia asked, skepticism lacing her tone. Yeah, fry them, and keep the Quarlocks busy while we do it. I want them so tangled up in their own tech that they won't know a neural implant from a data processor. Talia considered this, a slow smile spreading across her face. I might have a few tricks up my sleeve. Don't we all? Loxley replied, feeling a spark of hope amidst the gloom. Let's give them the full human experience, unpredictability included. The next day, as if on cue, the Quarlocks returned, this time with a more sinister air. Squidward and his fellow dignitaries marched in, carrying devices that glowed with an unsettling blue light. Loxley and Talia were waiting for them in the station's central hub, the heart of the beast. The Quarlocks paused, their myriad eyes blinking in unsettling unison. Greetings, esteemed humans, Squidward intoned, tentacles writhing with what might have been eagerness or just gas. We bring enhancements to aid your efficiency. Oh joy, Loxley said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. I've always wanted to be a more efficient cog in the galactic machine. Squidward either didn't get the sarcasm or chose to ignore it. Please allow us to demonstrate. The aliens moved with unnerving precision, attaching their devices to various points around the hub. Loxley watched, irritation building as the Quarlocks fawned over their tech like proud parents at a science fair. Something tells me this isn't going to end with free coffee, Talia muttered, standing close enough for him to hear. Only if you consider mind control a caffeine substitute, Loxley replied. As the Quarlocks activated their devices, a low hum filled the room, vibrating through the floor and walls like an unwelcome guest. Loxley felt the hair on his arms stand on end, mirroring the rising tension. Observe, Squidward said, gesturing grandly at the room. Your productivity will be enhanced, your efficiency maximized. Loxley forced a smile. Can't wait. The hum intensified and Loxley closed his eyes, thinking furiously. He needed to stall them, keep them occupied while Talia worked her magic. The trouble was, how do you distract a being with multiple eyes and the attention span of an overcaffeinated toddler? Hey, Squidward, Loxley called, injecting a note of urgency into his voice. You might want to check that panel over there. It's been a bit unstable lately. Squidward's eyes darted to where Loxley pointed, suspicion coloring the rainbow hues of its skin. Unstable, we were not informed. Yeah, must have slipped through the cracks in our pristine bureaucratic system, Loxley said, gesturing vaguely. But you know how these things go. 1 minute it's all fine, the next boom. Boom, Squidward repeated, narrowing his eyes. Figure of speech, Loxley assured him. But better safe than sorry, right? As Squidward reluctantly moved to inspect the panel, Talia slipped away, blending into the shadows with practiced ease. Loxley kept talking, filling the air with noise as she worked her way around the room, setting their plan into motion. Humans are such complex creatures, Loxley continued, drawing Squidward's attention back. We thrive on chaos, on unpredictability. It's what keeps us nimble. Squidward paused, one tentacle stroking its chin thoughtfully. You are unpredictable indeed. Part of our charm, Loxley said with a grin that didn't reach his eyes. Time ticked on, each second a tiny victory as Talia moved closer to disabling the devices. Loxley could feel the pressure building, a clock ticking down in his head with relentless precision. Finally, Talia returned to his side, a satisfied gleam in her eyes. We're good to go, she murmured under her breath. Loxley nodded, turning back to Squidward with a flourish. We appreciate the enhancements, really, but I think we'll stick to our own pace if you don't mind. Squidward blinked, a ripple of confusion passing through the Corlocks. Your pace? Yeah, you know. Slow and steady wins the race, all that jazz, Loxley replied, his voice smooth as a well-practiced con artist. Before Squidward could respond, the hum of the devices abruptly ceased, the glow dimming to nothing. Loxley felt a surge of triumph as the aliens exchanged bewildered glances. It appears there has been a malfunction, Squidward said, his voice tinged with disbelief. Just our luck, Loxley said, feigning concern. Guess our station isn't compatible with cutting-edge tech after all. Squidward frowned, eyes narrowing. We will investigate this anomaly. Sure, take your time, Loxley said, gesturing expansively. We'll be right here, embracing our inefficiency. As the Corlocks busied themselves with their devices, Loxley and Talia shared a look, the silent communication of conspirators who have just pulled off a heist. Think they'll ever figure it out? Talia whispered, her voice barely audible over the clamor of alien frustration. If they do, we'll be ready, Loxley replied, confidence threading his voice. Prepared for anything? She asked, raising an eyebrow. Let's just say this, Loxley said, a grin tugging at his lips. They picked the wrong humans to mess with. As the Corlocks continued their futile attempts to salvage their precious gadgets, Loxley and Talia slipped away, leaving behind a scene of barely controlled chaos. So what's next? Talia asked as they retreated to the observation deck. Next we plan, Loxley replied, his mind already racing with possibilities, because I have a feeling the Corlocks aren't done with us yet. And we won't be done with them, Talia said, a fierce determination in her eyes. Exactly, Loxley said, looking out at the vastness of space. Because as long as we're here, they're going to learn one thing for sure. What's that? Talia asked, curious. That humans don't go down without a fight, Loxley said, his voice steady as the station beneath their feet. And we always fight dirty. As if in agreement, the station groaned ominously, a reminder of its own precarious existence. Loxley smiled, feeling a strange kinship with the old, battered structure. They were both stubborn survivors, holding on, standing firm and ready to face whatever tomorrow might bring. Here's to chaos, Loxley said, raising his imaginary glass once more. To chaos, Talia echoed, returning the gesture, and with that they turned back to the stars, ready for whatever madness awaited them next. The clatter of metal echoed through the corridors of Jupiter Station Zephyr, the sound as irritating as sandpaper on a sunburn. Somewhere, a pipe was leaking, adding a rhythmic drip to the background. It was the kind of noise that could drive a person slowly mad, or, given the current situation, quickly furious. Loxley Zane blinked, the world coming back into focus, albeit through a haze of dull pain. He was slumped against a bulkhead in what looked like a storage room, the kind of place that had seen better days about a decade ago and now had all the charm of a public restroom. Welcome back to the land of the living. Talia's voice cut through the fog, laden with her usual helping of sarcasm, or at least the land of the semi-conscious. Where are we? He groaned, shifting to sit up. His muscles protested like they'd just run a marathon without an ounce of water. Corlock's hospitality suite, Talia replied, her disdain for their captors evident. She was perched on a crate, her posture relaxed despite the situation. They didn't like our little show and decided to up the ante. Great, Loxley muttered, running a hand through his hair which felt like it had been styled by a vacuum cleaner. I always wanted a tour of their brig. The room was sparse, just a collection of crates, some outdated equipment, and a ceiling so low Loxley was sure it was designed to keep human spirits, and skulls, perpetually bruised. The sound of dripping water was the only witness to their predicament. Where's the rest of the gang? He asked, glancing around. Split up, probably to make our lives as difficult as possible. Talia shrugged. They dragged you and me here to contemplate our sins, I guess. Nice to know they have a sense of irony, Loxley chuckled dryly, though the humor didn't quite reach his eyes, a sign of our alien overlords. They pop in every now and then to gloat, Talia said, miming a multiple-eyed glare, or to remind us how great their tech is, you know the usual. Love a good taunting, Loxley said, rubbing his temples as if he could massage away the situation. So what's the plan, because I'm fresh out of brilliant ideas? Talia leaned back, crossing her arms. We wait for a chance, then move. They're not infallible and we're a sneaky bunch. True, Loxley agreed. They may have more eyes, but we've got more guts. Besides, Talia continued, flashing a grin, I might have lifted a little something from our captors during their last visit. Loxley's eyebrows shot up. You never fail to impress. What you get? Just a little something, she said, pulling out a small, sleek device from her pocket. Think of it as our very own key to opportunity. Looks like a fancy paperweight, Loxley remarked, but the glint in Talia's eyes told him it was far more valuable. It's a disruptor, Talia explained. Portable, short range, but it should mess with their tech long enough for us to make a break. Not bad for days' work, Loxley said, feeling a flicker of hope in the gloom. But we'll need to time it just right. Sure, just like baking a cake, except if we screw up, it's us in the oven, Talia replied, her dark humor a comforting constant. They exchanged a look, the silent understanding of two people who'd been through the ringer together more times than they could count. Loxley pushed to his feet, bracing himself against the wall, wincing as a fresh wave of dizziness hit him. Steady there, sailor, Talia said, standing up and offering a hand. Can't have you face-planting before we even start. He took the hand with a nod of gratitude. Right. Time to give our multi-eyed friends a run for their money. They didn't have to wait long. The door slid open with a mechanical hiss, and in came a pair of Corlock's guards, though calling them guards seemed generous. They were more like hall monitors with bad attitudes and a penchant for irritating snickers. Ah, our favorite guests, one of them said, its voice oozing condescension as if it had a master's degree in it. Enjoying your accommodations. Like a vacation on Venus, Loxley said, giving them his best forced smile. You should try it sometime. The guards exchanged a glance, their skin rippling in a disconcerting way. We will see you soon, they replied, clearly not in on the joke, as per usual. As the guards turned to leave, Talia subtly activated the disruptor. Loxley watched as the device in her hand glowed faintly, casting a soft light that seemed utterly innocuous, until the Corlock's devices began to flicker and spark like they'd been dropped into a bathtub. What is happening? One guard screeched, looking down at the malfunctioning tech attached to its body. This is unacceptable. Must be those pesky atmospheric anomalies, Loxley quipped, stepping forward with newfound confidence. You know how unpredictable space can be. The second guard frantically fiddled with its device, its panic almost comical if it wasn't for the fact that they were still technically prisoners. But the devices were offline, and that was the opportunity they needed. Now, Talia hissed, and they moved as one, slipping past the disoriented guards with the ease of seasoned thieves. The corridors outside were as unremarkable as the room they'd been in, dull metal walls and the occasional flickering light, the hallmark of a station long past its golden years. But to Loxley and Talia it was the path to freedom. Where do we go? Talia asked, keeping pace with Loxley. Engine room, Loxley replied without hesitation. The heart of the beast. If we can control it, we control the station. Lead the way, Talia said, matching his stride, her confidence as infectious as ever. They moved quickly, dodging the occasional patrol and using the station's own creaky infrastructure to cover their tracks. Loxley felt a sense of purpose returning with every step, the familiar corridors spurring him on. Remember, we need to get the Corlocks off our backs, he murmured, pressing himself against a wall as a patrol passed by unsuspectingly. If we can't, then we better hope Squidward prefers his human stir-fried. Got it, Talia replied, eyes scanning for any signs of immediate danger. But if they find us first? They won't, Loxley cut in, his tone brooking no argument. We've done this before and we'll do it again. With each turn they edged closer to the engine room. The station moaned around them like an old beast, its protests growing louder as they approached their destination. Loxley could almost feel its heartbeat in the walls, a steady, reassuring rhythm that matched his resolve. They reached the entrance to the heart of the beast without incident, the imposing door looming like a sentinel. Loxley paused, feeling the gravity of the moment. You ready? Talia asked, her hand poised over the control panel. Hell, I was born ready, Loxley replied, the ghost of a smile on his lips. The door slid open, revealing the engine room bathed in the harsh glow of its emergency lights. The machinery hummed, a symphony of noise that filled the space like the roar of an ancient dragon. "Welcome to the nerve center," Loxley said, taking it all in. "Time to give our hosts a little surprise." Talia nodded, moving to the main console with the confidence of someone who'd been born to hack systems. Loxley took up position by the door, feeling every second stretch out like an eternity. "Can you do it?" Loxley asked, glancing over his shoulder. Talia's fingers danced over the controls, her focus absolute. "If I can't, then we're screwed in the most spectacular fashion," she said, not looking up. "But I like our odds." Loxley watched as the system responded to Talia's touch, the displays lighting up with lines of code that danced like fireflies. He allowed himself to breathe, just for a moment, trusting in Talia's skill and their combined tenacity. "We're in," Talia announced, triumph lacing her voice. "I've got control." "Good," Loxley said, relief flooding him. "Now let's send those multi-eyed bastards a message they won't forget." Talia's fingers flew across the console, inputting commands that would send the station into controlled chaos, enough to give them the edge they needed to turn the tables. Loxley could almost taste the victory, a tantalizing promise just out of reach. Then, as if on cue, the station's systems roared to life, the lights flickering in a display that was both ominous and exhilarating. Alarms blared, a cacophony of sound that echoed through the corridors like a rallying cry. "Let's see how they like a little unpredictability," Loxley said, adrenaline coursing through his veins. The engine room lights pulsed in time with the alarms, casting the space in an eerie glow. Talia stood back, admiring her handiwork with a grin that was equal parts satisfaction and defiance. "Think they'll get the hint?" she asked, turning to Loxley. "Oh, I think they'll get more than a hint," Loxley replied, his smile widening. "They'll get the whole damn parade." As the station shuddered under their command, Loxley felt a surge of camaraderie with Talia, the shared understanding of two people who'd been through hell and back, and were ready to face whatever came next. "Now what?" Talia asked, her eyes gleaming with anticipation. "Now," Loxley said, his voice steady, "we fight back, and we show them what humans are really made of." And so it began. Their fight for freedom, for dignity, and for the right to be more than just another experiment in the eyes of alien overlords. Together, they stood ready to face the oncoming storm, their resolve as unyielding as the station they called home. The heart of the beast pulsed with energy, a testament to their determination and grit. And as the chaos unfolded, Loxley knew, deep down, that they were far from done, that this was only the beginning of a much larger battle. "Here's to chaos," Loxley said, raising an imaginary glass once more, a silent vow to continue fighting no matter the odds. "To chaos," Talia echoed, her voice carrying the weight of their shared journey. And with that they turned back to the task at hand, united in purpose and ready for whatever madness awaited them next. Loxley leaned back against the humming console, eyes scanning the engine room. The heart of the beast was thumping away like a pensioner on a treadmill, but he couldn't help but feel a shred of affection for the old girl. It might not be the snazziest ship in the space fleet, but damn if it didn't have character, something those shiny Quarlox crafts lacked entirely. "Think they've noticed yet?" Talia asked, fiddling with a particularly stubborn switch. The engine room's dim lights cast strange shadows, making their reflections twitch like nervous specters. "Oh, I'm sure they've noticed," Loxley replied, a note of wicked satisfaction in his voice. "The question is, have they worked out their gadgets are about as reliable as a politician's promise?" Talia snorted, her fingers dancing over the controls like a pianist with a death wish. "Never thought our freedom would hinge on alien tech being as faulty as our own. Poetic, really." "Yeah, nothing like interstellar irony to spice up the day," Loxley said, the tension in his shoulders easing just a fraction. The Quarlox, bless their multi-eyed hearts, relied so heavily on their tech that they were practically sewn to it, like overgrown kids who thought a smartphone was the pinnacle of evolution. But Loxley had realized something important. Every gadget, no matter how advanced, had its Achilles heel, and Loxley, being the opportunistic devil he was more than happy to play the part of the heel seeker. By the way, Talia said, her eyes glinting with mischief that could only mean trouble, I found something interesting while poking around their systems. Oh yeah, Loxley replied, raising an eyebrow. What you find, a plan to invade Earth with bad sitcoms. Worse, Talia said, tapping the screen with a flourish. A backdoor. Loxley blinked. A backdoor. You mean as in a we can screw with their tech kind of backdoor? Talia grinned like a cat that had not only eaten the canary but also got away with it. The very same. Seems our alien overlords got a little lazy with their encryption. Now, if there was one thing Loxley excelled at, it was sticking it to the powers that be. Especially when those powers had more eyes than sense and saw him as little more than a lab rat. Then let's give them a taste of good old human ingenuity, Loxley said, the gears in his head already turning with delicious possibilities. Talia nodded, hands a blur over the console. Let's just hope they don't have a backup plan, or at least not a decent one. Please, when have we ever been that lucky? Loxley quipped, though there was a flicker of hope behind his cynicism. The station trembled with newfound life, part of Loxley's plan to make the Quarlocks feel like they were in the middle of a cosmic roller coaster. Not that they'd understand the concept of a roller coaster, they seemed more like the Bridge Club type. Do we know what their next move is? Loxley asked, peering over Talia's shoulder as lines of alien script scurried across the screen. They're regrouping, Talia replied, pointing at a section of the screen filled with alien gibberish that might as well have been the script for an avant-garde play. Looks like they're going to make one last push. Great. Just what we needed, Loxley said, dry as the Martian desert. A dramatic finale. Talia smirked. I'd say we give them one they won't forget. Music to my ears, Loxley replied, already feeling more like his old self. See how they handle a little unpredictability. As they worked, the engine room seemed to close in around them, its walls echoing with the sounds of their rebellion. Loxley knew that each keystroke, each flick of a switch, was a step closer to either freedom or disaster. Hey Loxley, Talia said, breaking the silence. If we pull this off, what do you say we find a real drink somewhere? None of that synth grog they peddle on the outer stations. You buying? Loxley asked, a grin tugging at his lips. Talia shrugged, her dark eyes twinkling with mischief. If we survive this, I'll buy you the whole damn bar. Sounds like a plan, Loxley said, feeling the absurdity of their situation lift his spirits. Trust humans to be planning a bar crawl in the middle of a rebellion. The console beeped, a triumphant sound that felt too good to be true. We're in, Talia said, and even through the layers of sarcasm and cynicism, Loxley could hear the note of hope. Time to make them wish they'd never set those glittery appendages near us, Loxley said, cracking his knuckles. The Quarlocks might have seen themselves as sophisticated overlords, but Loxley was about to show them that sometimes the scrappy underdog packed the biggest punch. Let's start with their communications, Talia said, her fingers flying over the controls. Scramble them like Sunday breakfast. Scrambled, fried, or poached? Loxley asked, his voice light but his focus razor-sharp. Extra crispy, Talia replied, her grin a devilish curve. As the station's systems danced to their tune, Loxley felt something he hadn't in a long time. Control. The kind of control that could turn the tables and maybe, just maybe, put them back in charge of their own fate. Now about their backup plan, Talia said, trailing off as she tapped into another layer of alien security. Let me guess, it involves them thinking they can break us down like a cheap toy, Loxley guessed. Pretty much, Talia confirmed. But I've got another trick up my sleeve. Oh, do tell, Loxley prompted, curiosity piqued. Remember that disruptor? Talia asked, pulling the device from her pocket again. Turns out it doesn't just go haywire on their gadgets. It can also send out a signal that makes them see things. See things? Loxley echoed, intrigued. Hallucinations, Talia clarified, should give us enough of an edge to push them back. Or at least confuse the hell out of them, Loxley said, an idea forming. Let's make them see their worst nightmare. Which is? Talia asked, already anticipating his answer. Us, Loxley declared, eyes alight with fierce determination. Humans who won't roll over and play dead. Talia laughed, a sound that was equal parts amusement and battle cry. I like that plan. Loxley couldn't help but feel a surge of camaraderie with Talia. Together, they were more than just rebels, they were a force to be reckoned with. The Quarlocks wouldn't know what hit them. "Let's get to it then," Talia said, her voice firm with purpose. They worked quickly, each movement precise and deliberate. The heart of the beast became their ally, its hum a comforting backdrop to their defiance. Loxley felt the rhythm of the station in his veins, a pulse of energy that spurred him on. "Ready?" Talia asked, her hand poised over the final command. "Always," Loxley replied, his voice steady. Talia activated the disruptor, the device humming to life with a soft whine. The alien systems flickered, their screens lighting up with distorted images. Loxley imagined the Quarlocks seeing phantoms of rebellion, visions of humans standing unbroken. "What do you think they're seeing?" Talia wondered aloud, watching the chaos unfold on the monitors. "Whatever it is, it's enough to unsettle them," Loxley said, satisfaction curling in his chest. "That's exactly what we need." The station shuddered as if in agreement, the alarms blaring a symphony of resistance. Loxley knew that each second they held control was a victory in itself. "We'll need to act fast," Talia said, her focus unwavering. "They won't stay confused for long." "Then let's make the most of it," Loxley replied, his mind already racing with strategies. Together, they initiated the next phase of their plan. The Quarlocks had underestimated them, and now it was time to show them the consequences of their oversight. As they worked, Loxley couldn't help but reflect on how far they'd come. From prisoners to rebels, from captives to combatants. It wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about reclaiming their dignity, their autonomy. "Think they'll remember us?" Talia asked, her voice a blend of humor and defiance. "Oh, they'll remember us," Loxley said, his confidence unshakable. "We'll be the thorn in their side they can't pluck out." The station trembled with energy, the lights flickering in a dance of rebellion. Loxley felt the thrill of the fight coursing through him, a reminder that they were far from finished. With every keystroke, every calculated move, they carved their path to freedom. The Quarlocks might have been the ones holding the chains, but Loxley and Talia were the ones breaking them. And as the heart of the beast pulsed with life, Loxley knew they weren't just fighting for themselves. They were fighting for every human who refused to be subjugated. "Here's to turning the tables," Loxley said, raising an imaginary glass once more, his voice a vow of resistance. "To turning the tables," Talia echoed, her voice carrying the weight of their shared struggle. And with that they continued their fight, ready to face whatever madness awaited them next. Theirs was a battle of wits and will, and they were more than prepared to see it through to the end. The cosmic chaos unfolding on the Jupiter station Zephyr made a carnival funhouse look like a toddler's birthday party. Loxley and Talia stood at the helm of the pandemonium, orchestrating what was, by all accounts, a masterclass in interstellar anarchy. The Quarlocks, with their shimmering skins and eyes like misplaced Christmas ornaments, had started to realize that humans were far from the docile, entertaining pets they had imagined. "Look at them," Loxley said, pointing to the monitor where a group of Quarlocks dignitaries flailed about like they were in a slapstick comedy. "They've got that what the hell just happened. Look, like their brains finally short-circuited." Talia snorted. "I guess they weren't programmed to handle good old-fashioned human chaos. Bless their multi-eyed hearts." The Quarlocks might have been equipped with fancy technology and a superiority complex the size of a gas giant, but they'd underestimated two critical elements: human ingenuity and the ability to improvise badly at a moment's notice. "Okay, time to up the ante," Talia said, her fingers flying over the controls. "Let's see how they handle a little sensory overload." Loxley nodded, his grin wide enough to rival a Cheshire cat that had just robbed a cream factory. "Let's give them the full sensory smorgasbord, sound, light, and a dash of nausea-inducing vertigo for good measure." As Talia triggered the next sequence, the station's lights swung into an epileptic fit, and the sound system blared what could only be described as a dubstep track composed by someone having an existential crisis. The Quarlocks, unaccustomed to such a visceral assault on their senses, staggered and wobbled like drunkards at a zero-gravity disco. If only they'd brought popcorn, Loxley mused, half to himself, half to Talia. They could have enjoyed the show. Lucky for them, we've got the entertainment covered, Talia replied, a wicked glint in her eye. Let's move to Phase 2, friendly fire. Loxley leaned back, thoroughly enjoying the spectacle. You know, I almost feel sorry for them. Almost. Don't go soft on me now, Talia chided, though her grin suggested she'd never seen him more in his element. We've still got to drive home the point that we're not just some zoo exhibit to be poked and prodded. The Quarlocks, amidst their stumbling, had started to regroup, their shimmering skins reflecting the chaotic light in a way that would have been mesmerizing under different circumstances. They fumbled with their devices, desperately trying to regain control, but the backdoor Talia had exploited ensured they were running in circles like hamsters on a very expensive wheel. Here comes the cavalry, Loxley said as a new batch of Quarlocks entered the fray, each looking more bewildered than the last. Guess they figured sending in reinforcements would solve their little human problem. Hey, more the merrier, Talia quipped as she activated another program. Time for them to meet a little taste of artificial paranoia. Let's see how they handle fighting phantoms. As the program took effect, the Quarlocks began to see enemies where there were none. They flailed and shouted, their language a cacophony of clicks and hisses as they turned on one another in a frenzy of miscommunication. Loxley and Talia watched with satisfaction as the dignified alien visitors devolved into chaos. Think they'll realize they're hallucinating? Loxley wondered aloud, not bothering to hide his amusement. If they were smarter, maybe, Talia replied, shaking her head. But it seems all those eyes aren't helping them see the obvious. The observation deck, usually a testament to human humility in the vastness of space, now served as a stage for this cosmic comedy. Loxley, ever the opportunist, decided it was time to up the stakes. Let's give them a taste of their own medicine, he suggested. Remember that little neural interface trick they wanted to pull on us? Time we flipped the script. Talia raised an eyebrow. You sure you want to dive into that? Could get messy. Messy's our middle name, Loxley replied, cracking his knuckles. Besides, imagine the headlines. Aliens out-humaned by actual humans. All right, but if we end up with more eyes than we started with, I'm blaming you, Talia said, although her smirk indicated she was very much on board. As Loxley tapped into the neural interface systems, he couldn't help but marvel at the poetic justice of it all. The Quarlocks had come here to experiment with human emotion and productivity, to treat them like lab rats under a microscope. Now they were about to get a first-hand experience of what it meant to live with a human brain: chaos, unpredictability, and unfiltered emotion. Here goes nothing, Loxley muttered as he initiated the override. The effect was instantaneous. The Quarlocks collectively paused, their chaotic clamor ceasing as they experienced, for the first time, the raw surge of human emotion. It was like flipping a switch, throwing them into a maelstrom of feelings they hadn't the tools to process. They're feeling, Talia said, her voice a mix of awe and triumph. All those emotions they wanted to analyze are hitting them like a freight train. Welcome to humanity, Loxley declared. Enjoy the ride. The Quarlocks, disoriented and overwhelmed, stumbled around as though they were trying to navigate through a sandstorm of sensations. Their previously pristine confidence crumbled, their alien dignity blown away by the whirlwind of human experience. I think they are realizing we're not as simple as they thought, Talia said, a hint of satisfaction in her tone. Loxley nodded, watching as the Quarlocks grappled with the new reality they'd been thrust into. It was a heady sensation, seeing these supposed overlords brought low by the very thing they'd sought to control. Well, this is educational, Loxley remarked. Think they're reevaluating their opinion on humans? Judging by the looks on their faces, I'd say yes, Talia replied, laughing. They might even start to see us as more than just a chaotic nuisance. As the Quarlocks continued to struggle with their unexpected emotional enlightenment, Loxley knew they'd made their point. Humans weren't just subjects to be studied or cogs in a machine. They were a force of nature, unpredictable and resilient. Time to wrap this up, Loxley said, feeling the weight of their victory settling in. Let's see if they're ready to talk. Talia nodded, her fingers dancing over the controls once more as she began to stabilize the systems. The lights dimmed to a more bearable state, and the cacophony of sound faded into a low hum. The Quarlocks, slowly regaining their senses, blinked at the two humans with something resembling respect, or at least the alien equivalent of it. "Shall we?" Loxley asked, gesturing to the control panel that would open a channel to the Quarlocks. "Let's," Talia replied, leaning in as they initiated contact. The screen flickered to life and the Quarlocks leader appeared, his many eyes regarding the humans with a mixture of wariness and newfound appreciation. "Congratulations," Loxley said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "You've just graduated from Understanding Humans 101. How does it feel?" The Quarlocks leader, to his credit, managed to maintain some semblance of composure despite the ordeal. "We underestimated you," he admitted, his tone begrudging. "Your resilience is impressive." "Resilience?" Talia echoed, more like stubbornness and a refusal to be anyone's lab rat. The leader nodded, or at least performed a Quarlock's equivalent. "We will need to reconsider our approach." Loxley leaned closer to the monitor, his eyes narrowing. "You do that, and next time maybe come with a little more respect and a little less condescension." "Understood," the Quarlock's leader replied, his demeanor suggesting a truce rather than defeat. "We have much to learn." "Learning's good," Loxley said, his tone softening just a fraction. "Just don't expect us to make it easy." With that, the communication ended, leaving Loxley and Talia in the dimly lit engine room. The heart of the beast hummed quietly, the only sound in the silence that followed their triumph. "Well," Talia said, breaking the quiet, "that was fun." "Fun's one way to put it," Loxley replied, feeling the adrenaline ebb away. "Think they'll leave us alone?" "For now," Talia said, stretching her arms, "but we might have just earned a little respect in the process." "Respect," Loxley echoed, rolling the word around like a fine wine. "Who would have thought?" They stood there for a moment, basking in their victory before Talia broke the spell. "So, about that drink I promised." Loxley laughed, a genuine hearty sound that felt good, as if he was shaking off the weight of the galaxy. "Yeah, I think we've earned it." The heart of the beast might not have been the shiniest or the newest, but it was theirs, and they'd made it sing in a way the Quarlocks would never forget. And as they left the engine room, Loxley couldn't help but feel a swell of pride in what they'd achieved. In the grand scheme of things, maybe they were just two humans in a vast, uncaring universe, but today, they'd shown that they were more than that. They were scrappy, irreverent, and full of surprises, just like humanity at its best. The aftermath of chaos always had a certain charm to it, like the moment you realize your hangover might actually kill you, but you survived the night anyway. Jupiter Station Zephyr was no different. It was still holding itself together in that stubborn way only ancient, out-of-date tech could, like a cantankerous old man who'd lived through one too many wars and too few good times. The lights were back to their usual dull flicker, and the dubstep massacre had mercifully died. A small mercy, considering that most of the station's population had been on the verge of spontaneous implosion. Loxley Zane found himself where he usually was after a good romp through anarchy, leaning against a bulkhead, nursing a collection of bruises and a sense of gleeful satisfaction. He watched as the Quarlocks dignitaries, looking a bit like a troop of bedraggled peacocks, shuffled around the observation deck with something approaching respect, or maybe it was just fear. Loxley was fine with either. Beside him, Talia was tapping away on her data pad, her brow furrowed in concentration. "So," she said without looking up, "think our new alien pals are finally ready to stop treating us like the special exhibit at the Intergalactic Zoo?" Loxley shrugged, the movement sending a dull throb through his shoulder. "Hard to say. Some folks gotta learn the hard way that sticking your hand in the human blender gets you cut." Talia snorted. "Well, they got a crash course. Think they'll be writing home about their enlightening experience. Assuming they can get through it without collapsing under the weight of human emotion," Loxley replied. "Not exactly a walk in the park, is it?" "Nope, more like a stroll through hell with a side of existential crisis." Their conversation was interrupted by the approach of a Quarlock's dignitary, the leader, a relatively composed figure compared to his jittery entourage. He stopped before them, his eyes, a ridiculous number of them, fixing on the two humans with an intensity that would have been intimidating if it weren't so comically wide-eyed. Loxley Zane Talia, he said, in that click-hiss hybrid language that was now tinged with something almost polite. We wish to discuss. Loxley raised an eyebrow. Oh, come to tell us how much fun you've been having on Jupiter Station, or maybe you'd like to book another ride on the emotional roller coaster. The Quarlock's leader didn't rise to the bait, which was a little disappointing. We wish to understand your species. You are not as we estimated. Join the club, Talia muttered under her breath, not bothering to hide her smirk. The Quarlocks continued, your resilience, adaptability. It is intriguing, we believe. We can learn from you. Loxley exchanged a look with Talia, who just shrugged, her expression somewhere between amused and incredulous. Well, he said, turning back to their visitor, we humans are a complicated bunch. Takes more than a neural interface and some fancy gadgets to figure us out. The leader nodded, at least 4 of his heads bobbed in a strange harmony. We propose an alliance, to share ideas. An alliance, huh? Loxley crossed his arms, pretending to mull it over. What's in it for us? The leader hesitated, clearly not used to such direct negotiation. We can offer technology, knowledge. There is much we can exchange. Sounds nice, Talia said, leaning back nonchalantly, but we're not exactly the trust fund kids of the galaxy. We need more than shiny toys. Like respect, Loxley added, his tone sharpening. And maybe an understanding that humans aren't your playthings. The Quarlock's leader seemed to consider this, his skin shimmering in a way that suggested contemplation. Agreed, he finally said. We will respect your autonomy. Loxley nodded, feeling a surprising twinge of satisfaction. And here I thought today would just end with another explosion. Could still happen, Talia chimed in, ever the optimist. Hey, progress. The leader inclined his heads again. We will begin with the sharing of cultural practices as a gesture of goodwill. Cultural practices, Loxley repeated, unable to suppress a grin. You mean like teaching you how to handle a hangover or introducing you to the concept of sarcasm? Talia laughed. Oh, that'll be rich. Can you imagine these guys trying to understand irony? The Quarlock's leader blinked in confusion, a universal gesture. Apparently, we will endeavor to appreciate it. Good luck, Loxley said, clapping the alien on what he hoped was a shoulder. You're in for one hell of a ride. As the Quarlock's delegates shuffled off to presumably start writing a manual on how not to be condescending jerks, Loxley and Talia lingered on the observation deck, watching the slow swirl of Jupiter's clouds through the reinforced glass. Think we did something good today? Talia asked, her voice unusually introspective. Loxley considered it, the weight of their actions settling like a comforting blanket. We did something, he said at last, and if good comes out of it, well, that's a bonus. Guess we'll see, Talia replied, leaning back against the wall, her expression thoughtful. Yeah, Loxley agreed, and if not, there's always a next time. Ever the optimist, Talia teased, bumping his shoulder with hers. Hey, it's not optimism, Loxley retorted, a sly grin on his face. It's just a healthy disregard for the odds. They stood there for a while, lost in the view and their own thoughts, the quiet hum of the station a comforting backdrop to their musings. The universe was vast and uncaring, a behemoth that devoured hope and dreams alike without a second thought. But in that moment on that worn-out station, they'd managed to carve out a small victory, a testament to human tenacity and the ability to adapt, even when the odds seemed stacked against them. The Quarlocks had come with their superior technology and condescending attitudes, expecting to find another primitive species to manipulate and control. Instead, they'd found something else entirely, an inconvenient truth wrapped in human stubbornness and defiance. And maybe that was enough for now. Maybe it was enough to know that, against all odds, humans had once again proven they were more than just the sum of their parts, that they could stand toe-to-toe with the best and brightest the galaxy had to offer and make them blink. As the stars beyond the station twinkled in the endless night, Loxley and Talia shared a quiet moment of triumph, their laughter echoing softly in the empty corridors. They might not have saved the galaxy, but they'd won a victory of sorts, a small, defiant flicker of light in the dark. And that was worth celebrating. So, Talia said, breaking the silence at last, about that drink. Yeah, Loxley replied, a smile spreading across his face. I think we've earned it. As they made their way toward the mess hall, their steps light with the satisfaction of a job well done, Loxley couldn't help but wonder what the future would bring. The galaxy was still a vast, untamed frontier, teeming with challenges and dangers yet to be faced. But for now, they'd face it together, with humor, grit, and a healthy dose of irreverence. And maybe, just maybe, that would be enough to see them through whatever lay ahead. To unlikely alliances, Loxley said, raising an imaginary glass as they walked. And to keeping the universe on its toes, Talia replied, matching his gesture with her own. Together they stepped into the unknown, ready to face whatever the cosmos had in store for them, with a grin and a quip at the ready, ever the scrappy underdogs in a universe that never stopped trying to put them in their place. And as they walked, amid the hum and thrum and the faint metallic echo of their steps, one truth remained. The universe was vast and they were small, but they were also resilient, stubborn, and above all human. And that, they reckoned, was more than enough.